Are you struggling with acid reflux every single day? Do you get pain in the chest? Have you ever had a stomach ulcer? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you may be infected with a H pylori bacteria. In this video, we're going to break down 5 signs that you may have H pylori even if your test was negative. The number one obvious sign that you have H pylori and need to get it treated ASAP. How to test for this bacteria properly so you don't get a worst case scenario, which is a false negative where you actually have the bacteria, you just can't find it in a test. We're going to talk about some medication options that you can get from your doctor and some herbal remedies that you can't. We'll talk about how to bulletproof your body against future infections of this dangerous bacteria. Don't forget to stay to the end for a bonus tip on what to do if someone in your household is infected with H pylori. First of all, what on earth is H pylori? So an H pylori is a contagious bacteria that is known to cause acid reflux, stomach ulcers, and even stomach cancer. A study in the Journal of Gastroenterology in 2017 revealed that we think half the population has H pylori. But it doesn't always come with issues. For example, when infecting children, it doesn't seem to cause the same problems. And not all adults it infects suffer with digestive issues. And even in small amounts, it can actually be beneficial to you. But in order for it to be beneficial, and this is my opinion here, I believe that you need to have what we call good bacterial diversity, a strong, healthy microbiome, and a very small amount of H pylori. So what are some of the signs that you could have H pylori hidden and not know about it? Number 1, pain in the chest, right around this region. H pylori causes damage to what we call the mucosal cells of the stomach, which is effectively your stomach lining. Now, when chronic, this can cause gastritis. Anything ending in itis is inflammation. So gastritis is inflammation of the gastric cells of the stomach, but H pylori can also cause duodenitis, which is inflammation of the duodenum, which is the top part of your small intestine. And that pain people experience in that stomach region is likely due to the damage that H pylori is doing to those cells. Now, personally, when I had H pylori, it was a 10 out of 10 pain right in the center of the chest. It was extremely uncomfortable. Now, not everybody has that level of pain and discomfort when they have H pylori, but pain in the chest, I'd say absolutely get your heart checked, but that could totally be H pylori. The second sign that you can have H pylori is that you can't eat large amounts of food, or you're eating a lot less food than you used to eat before. That's because H pylori produces an enzyme called urase, and urase decreases your stomach acid and increases the pH, which reduces the acidity in the stomach. That means that when you eat, you don't have enough stomach acid to digest your food, so you get very full very quickly. H pylori can also affect your appetite, and in most people it will depress your appetite, so you end up people who have hidden H pylori infections, they keep losing weight because they can't eat a lot and they're really full and they don't know why. A third sign of H pylori is that you get reflux. H pylori causes acid reflux by 3 mechanisms. First, it reduces stomach acid. Now remember that enzyme we spoke about earlier, urase, that is what decreases the acidity of the stomach, and that means you struggle to digest your food, but also it interferes with the function of the lower esophageal sphincter. Now that's a little flap at the bottom of your esophagus that should close when you have enough acid inside your stomach. But when you have an H pylori infection, you don't produce as much stomach acid, so that lower esophageal sphincter doesn't close properly, and then acid can come up into the esophagus, causing that burning acid reflux. The second way that H pylori can cause acid reflux, and this is a slightly controversial take because there is science both ways. There is some science to say that it does and some science to say that it doesn't. At the moment, we're still unsure, but we think that H pylori can interfere directly with the lower esophageal sphincter. That's because we know that H pylori can actually colonize the cells of the esophagus and the mouth, so you could be swallowing it and irritating that esophagus. Finally, as mentioned in the Journal of Probiotic and Health, scientists have found a correlation between H pylori infection and a hiatal hernia, which is likely caused by a buildup of pressure inside the stomach from that H pylori bacterial infection. Sign number 4 that you have H pylori is that you have or you have had stomach ulcers. One of the ways we think that H pylori is causing stomach ulcers is that it burrows itself deep into the walls of the stomach, and that's where it does its damage by secreting inflammatory markers and producing that urase enzyme. One of the ways we think H pylori causes stomach ulcers is by burrowing into the walls of the stomach, weakening that area. We also think that the urase produced by the H pylori is released, and that also weakens the walls of the stomach. And when you have damage to the stomach, that's when you're more likely to get an ulcer. H pylori also causes a temporary increase in your gut acid production, where your system tries to fight back against the infection. This can cause a temporary increase in stomach acid production, which can also damage the cells of the stomach, leading to an ulcer. And finally, you know we spoke before about the pain that H. pylori causes. That is going to create inflammation and damage to the cells of the stomach. And that damage to the stomach and the stomach lining is, we think, how H. pylori is causing ulcers. The fifth sign that you have an H. pylori infection is nausea or gallbladder symptoms. Did you know that H. pylori has been shown to infect more than just the stomach? It can actually infect other organs like your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, and your small intestine. Not only does H. pylori infect the gallbladder, it's also been shown to cause gallstones. Now, your gallbladder is an essential organ to digest fats. When you eat large fatty food, gallbladder squirts bile into the small intestine to allow you to break fats from large globules down into smaller ones. If you don't have sufficient gallbladder flow, you can end up with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth and an inability to digest fats. The problem is H. pylori is incredibly difficult to find inside the gallbladder. There's no test for it while it's still attached to you. You have to remove the gallbladder and then you have to run a biopsy, and only then will you be able to figure out whether H. pylori has infected your gallbladder. Let's talk about how to test for H. pylori. The first test that's most common for H. pylori is a breath test. This is where you drink a solution containing urea, which is then broken down by the H. pylori, producing carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide is measured inside the breath test. A second test will be a blood antigen test for H. pylori. A sample of blood is drawn and the presence of H. pylori antigens is detected in the blood. The problem is you can't necessarily tell if the infection is current. Stool testing is also the preferred option in the UK at the current moment in time, checking for stool antigens against H. pylori. And finally, the gold standard of testing, the most accurate test by far to see whether H. pylori is inside your stomach, is a biopsy via an endoscopy. An endoscopy is where they insert a camera into your mouth, down through your esophagus and into your stomach, and they'll take a little snip, that's part of the biopsy, and then they test that tissue to see if you have H. pylori. However, a study in 2016 in the United European Gastrointestinal Journal showed there was a 56% chance of getting a false negative test on H. pylori if you were taking PPI medication in the 15 days leading up to the test. That means you have more chance of getting a false test than you do with a correct one if you're taking PPI meds in the lead up to your test. So what are your options if you have H. pylori or you think you have H. pylori? First off, can you prove it? Because if you can't prove it, then you can't go down the antibiotic route. Let's say, for example, you can't prove that you have H. pylori, but you'd like to rule it out, or you have some of the really obvious signs. What you can do is take a herbal supplement called Pylopurge. Now, Pylopurge contains 5 different herbs that have been shown to kill H. pylori and reduce some of the inflammatory effects. It was something I developed when I had H. pylori because I didn't want to take antibiotics. Also, it didn't show up properly in my test. It came back as inconclusive in my stool test. But I can tell you now, I had all the signs, especially that epigastric pain, which is pain right in the center of your chest where your stomach is. My thought process was, if I can avoid the antibiotics and use the herbs that have some very good science, then I might be able to avoid having antibiotics, which have been shown to damage your microbiome and then take years to recover. In my opinion, the worst case scenario you could be in is to go straight for antibiotics and it doesn't work. They normally give you more and more and more antibiotics, and I've seen cases of H. pylori that just will not disappear no matter how many levels of antibiotics they take. If you'd like to try the Pylopurge, I'll leave it in the description below. If you have a positive test and you're opting for medication, the standard treatment for H. pylori currently is what we call triple therapy, which is omeprazole plus 2 types of antibiotics. Now, the problem with antibiotics is over time, bacteria become resistant to them. So in some countries, they now use quadruple therapy, which is omeprazole plus 3 different antibiotics. The problem with overuse of antibiotics is that bacteria are becoming more and more resistant. What our scientists are currently looking to do is to test the particular strains of H. pylori and then try to match them up with the particular antibiotic. But that's still something that's currently in development, and I don't think it's anywhere out there in the world at the moment. Here's how to bulletproof your body against catching an H. pylori infection. Firstly, you must keep your stress levels low. When your stress levels are low, your stomach acid production is high, and therefore it's unlikely that you're likely to catch H. pylori bacteria. On the flip side, when your stress levels are high, your stomach acid production is reduced, and therefore you have an increased chance of catching H. pylori bacteria. Now, earlier I said that small amounts of H. pylori in some people can be beneficial, and I think that's because they have good bacterial diversity, which is they have lots of different types of bacteria and fungi and archaea inside their gut microbiome, and that's okay for H. pylori to live. I think you run into major problems when you have more H. pylori relative to the beneficial bacteria in your system. That's when you start to run into problems. I also think that's why kids don't suffer as much. Finally, keeping your immune system strong with vitamins like A, D, E, and K can be essential to keeping your immune system nice and strong to help prevent problems caused by H. pylori. As a bonus, what do you do when you live with someone who currently has a H. pylori infection? The answer is not much to begin with. Here's the problem. H. pylori doesn't affect everybody the same way. And just because somebody in your household has experienced symptoms, even if you catch H. pylori, it may not cause you any problems. Lots of people message me and say, Reese, I've had a H. pylori test, I'm positive, but I have no symptoms. What would you do in my situation? If that was me, I'd leave it well alone. I wouldn't touch it, and especially in kids. You have to be very, very careful in children. It doesn't seem to create the same type of problems, but speak to your doctor about what options that you have if you have someone in your family who's infected, especially if you have children. So there you have it, 5 signs that you have this dangerous bacteria. Hopefully this was useful. Please like and comment below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos.